It's your open source advocate, and I'm back, and I wanted to cover OPNSense. In the past, I've asked you about pfSense and OPNSense, and I had a lot of people interested in OPNSense. Now, these are really similar projects. pfSense started first, and it is owned by Netgate, and it's run by a business, but they do have an open source version, a community version that you can get and run completely free. OPNSense split off or forked that code base and basically started kind of working on their own version. They just didn't like the direction of the pfSense group, and they wanted to kind of do their own thing, and so it's really kind of almost turned into its own thing, and they kind of run a lot of things in parallel, but they don't run exactly the same. So I wanted to cover OPNSense. I don't think it's covered as much on a lot of these channels. So today I want to go through an install with you, and then we'll go through a basic setup, and basically I'll show you how everything is getting set up on my network. So I finally switched out everything from Eero, and I've now set up an OPNSense firewall and router, and then I've got 4 dd-wrt access points that I've set up for wired and wireless access throughout my property, basically. And that makes it a lot nicer for me. I've been really wanting to do that for a long time, and I've kind of struggled with it the last few times, and I finally just said I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to just push through it. So I want to show you the things that I did to set up OPNSense and how I set it up so that I can have access out from outside my network back in, as well as what they call NAT reflection or NAT redirection sometimes. Sometimes you hear it called hairpinning, where you're on your network and you're trying to hit something that you have a URL for, and you're trying to go outside your network and then hairpin turn and come right back into it. And a lot of times that doesn't work right out of the gate with a lot of routers, so they have a setting you can turn on for that, and in the case of PF and OPNSense, they both have settings for that as well. So I wanted to show you how to set that up too. So we'll go through that, and we'll just kind of get you up and running with OPNSense first, and then we can always add on extra devices later, and I'll show you kind of how I set up dd-wrt to act as my access points only and not really do the routing part of it. So I'll kind of turn this into a series, and if we want to do the same thing with pfSense later, we can definitely do that. I just want to say thank you so much to all of my patrons over at Patreon. I truly appreciate that you want to support me and support the content that I make every week for YouTube. I hope that you're really getting something out of it, and I hope that you'll tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us. I really want to just put the word out there about open source. That's why I refer to myself as the open source advocate. We're all really advocates for open source, and all of you guys supporting me and showing me that support just means so much to me that I can't even tell you how much it means. I just want to say thank you so very much. I truly appreciate it. Now let's get started. So OPNSense, you can just go out here to opensense.org, and it's spelled OPN and then sense, S-E-N-S-E. So if you're looking for it and you type in the OPEN version of open, it's not going to come up. So just be aware of that. It's OPNsense.org. And in here, you've got a few different options. So I'm just going to zoom up the screen. You can kind of see what they show you here. Now, they show you this nice dark mode. This is not in the system by default. It's some kind of plugin that you have to go get, and I have not found it. So my screen is going to be done in light mode for the most part. So get your eyes adjusted, get your screen brightness adjusted if you need to, but it's going to be much more like this through most of the video. The first part where the install will be dark because it's in a terminal, but after that, it's going to go to a light mode when we're looking at the web UI. So just be aware of that. If you jump over here to the download link, so I'm just going to click on that, and I'm going to bring this up a little bit bigger. You can see get your next open source firewall today, which is great. I think that's a really good way to kind of just say it, just get it, you know. So over here you've got some different options for architecture. They have AMD 64 is the only one that they've got right now. I'm hoping that they'll have more in the future. So this always confused me, and pfSense does the same thing. It's a little bit weird, but right here they actually tell you what it means, which is helpful. So they have this thing where it's like nano, DVD, VGA, and serial. And I'm sitting here going, what on earth is this? Like, do I want the DVD ISO? Because I'm going to use a USB stick. I don't even have a DVD burner anymore to make a DVD ISO. So what it is if you're going to use a DVD, like an actual physical DVD or a virtual DVD, grab the DVD ISO. If you're going to use a USB stick, you want to grab the VGA ISO, because basically it's saying we're going to use a VGA graphics card, and it's going to be either DVD ISO on a DVD, or it's going to be a burnable USB to boot from that USB. Why these are different, I don't know. I don't know that they have to be different for any other systems, but for some reason they are here. So just be aware of that when you come to this. If you want USB, grab this one that says VGA. If you want DVD, grab it. And then down here you select the mirror, so it's got the country. So just select the one that's closest to you. I don't know if this is the closest one, but I would pick this basically, and then you just click on download, and it's going to download a zipped up file. So it's a BZ2 file. It's pretty tightly compressed. I think when it comes down, it's about 320 megabytes. When you decompress it, it's going to be like a little over a gigabyte. So just be aware of that. All right, so we're going to jump over here into my virtual machine, and I'm going to start up a virtual machine here real quick. And we're basically going to run this in a virtual machine first, but I've set it up with a couple of network cards. So I've got the primary network card, and this is the one that I want to set up as my WAN. And then this will be my local area network, or my LAN, this other network card that I've kind of set up virtualized here. So I've actually got multiple network ports on the back of this server that I'm using. So I'm just going to jump over and open up the console window. And I'm just going to full screen this guy, and we're going to say start. And I'm just going to say, yeah, I really do want to do this. It's going to start booting up, and you're going to do this basically in a virtual machine. So let me make this full screen again. And you can just let it kind of go into this boot mode. So it's going to boot up into kind of what I call a live environment. It's going to scan your hardware. It's going to check to see what it has. And for this machine, I've given it 2 cores and 4 gigs of RAM. So it's not like the most beefy machine on earth or anything. This is just a virtual machine. My actual machine that I'm using is an HP T610, I believe is the number. So it's actually just a little computer, and then it's got a single built-in gigabit port, and then it's got an additional 4-port gigabit card built into the PCI area. So just makes it really easy as far as getting multiple ports out. I really only use 2 of those for now, but I have room to expand when I'm ready to expand my network. So it comes up and it says, hey, do you want to start doing something manually with the port assignments? You can do that. I usually just let it go ahead and grab any ports that it finds, and then I go and rearrange those later. And so right now you can see that it sees that it's got VTnet 1. This is what I want for my LAN actually, and VTnet 0 on LAN. And VTnet 1 on WAN, so I want to switch these. So we'll do that here in a minute after the rest of this comes up. We're going to kind of run through the install first, and then I'll go back and show you how to switch those. So just in case you get into the same problem, you kind of understand how it works. So once you get to here, you can just basically log in. Now, depending on what you want to do is going to depend on how you want to log in. So if you want to use it as a live environment, they even tell you right here, you would log in with the username root, and then the password is OPNSense, just like this is spelled, except all lowercase. But if you want to run the installer, then you need to log in as the user installer right here. And again, using that same password. So we're going to use installer. If I can click here, there we go. And OPNSense. That's going to start us into the installation process. Right here, you can pick whatever language you need. So you just go down here, you hit the space bar, you'll see a little asterisk show up right here. And that would give you Belgian. If you need to go down to Brazilian, accent keys, without accent keys, you've got all these different language options that you can pick for your keyboard. That's basically what it's doing. This is keyboard layout. Completely up to you how you set it. I just need the default key map. That's fine. So I'm just going to hit enter here. And then it gives you some installation options. So you see UFS. This is GPT partition with UEFI. This is ZFS with UEFI. So the first one is UFS. This is ZFS. You've got an extended installation option for different modes. You've got an import config. So if you have an OPNSense system and you save or back up your system, it gives you a config file. If you're just bringing up a new system, or you had a crash, you had to do something, you can just import that config that you already created. So that's really nice. If you need to do a password reset, basically recovering your installation, you can do that from here, which means you have physical access to the box. That's what they're kind of expecting. And then finally, you can force a reboot if you need to. So we're just going to do this one. This is the one that I'm going to pick. If you're using just kind of like a regular machine like I do, this is probably what you want. You might want to use ZFS, but if you're using SSDs and all that kind of stuff, I don't know how good ZFS is with that stuff, so kind of at your own risk. If you know ZFS, go for it. I'm going to stick with this one for now. So I'm just going to hit enter. Now it's going to come up and ask you, so we're using the DVD-ROM, so it sees that as CD0. But if you do this off of a USB, I've noticed that it says this letter here instead of CD0 says ADA0. Now this I've given 32 gigs. A lot of my USBs are 32 gigs. So I would not be able to tell the difference here. So it's worth knowing that ADA0 is your USB and DA0 is your hard drive. And it doesn't always, explicitly tell you hard disk and USB disk either. It tells you hard disk and hard disk. So just be aware, if you're doing it off of USB, it's really, really important to know that ADA0 is probably the USB drive. And if you can use a disk that's different in size from the hard drive, that's going to benefit you because you can tell which one is which. So I'm going to move down to the hard drive because that's where I want to install it. I'm going to highlight that, and then I'm just going to hit enter again. So it says continue with the recommended partition of size 8 gigabytes. I'm fine with that. I'm just going to say yes because that's twice what I gave it for the RAM. And so the last chance, am I sure that I want to do this? It's going to erase everything on DA0, and in this case I'm sure, so I'm going to hit yes. I'm going to just move over to yes and hit enter. And it's going to go through the process of partitioning. It's going to start copying some files and system files and things like that over. You can watch the progress as it goes across here, and then you'll see it do some finalization, and it'll basically be finished up. In this case, it's all virtualized, so it's pretty fast. It doesn't take very long, even when it's on an actual physical machine, but your times and things may vary depending on your hardware, so be ready for that. Alright, so the last thing that it asks you is, do you want to change the root password? In this case, it's always a good idea to do that. This is basically the access to your system on your home, your business or wherever you're running this, so you probably want to change that. So I'm going to hit, make sure it's highlighted, hit OK. I'm going to type in my password, and then I'm going to type it again. And it's going to go back to there, and then now we can do complete the installation, and it's going to exit and reboot. So we're just going to hit OK. It's going to do its thing. I'm just going to go ahead and exit here. I'll kind of let it go and do a real quick shutdown, and then it's going to basically start coming back up. And at that point, you can basically eject your DVD or pull out your USB whenever it kind of gets to that point that the machine starts to reboot all of a sudden. And that's fine. So I'm going to grab the CD. I'm going to hit remove disk, I think, remove right here, and yes, and then we can go back to our other window, and it's already in the process of rebooting, so it's fine. We'll bring that back up and let it come up. Alright, once we get to here, first thing it tells you is, hey, your LAN is on VTnet 0, and here's your IP address. Your WAN is on VTnet 1, and you don't have any IP because it's not connected to anything. This is a problem because we want our WAN to be set up where it gets an IP address, and the LAN just kind of generates this automatically. So we're going to switch that. So first we need to log in. So I'm going to type in my login password or my login user as root, and my password that I created in the previous installation steps. And you see here we get this kind of a list of options, and you basically just use the number to tell it what you want to do. So you can ping a host, you can get a shell, you can go to pftop, you can go to the firewall log, you can reload all services, update from the console, restore a backup, and then over here on the other side is kind of your main list of things that you want to do most of the time. You can log out. We're going to use number 1, which is assign interfaces. 2, if you want to set IP addresses specifically, you can do that from here instead of in the web GUI, but you can also do it in the web GUI. 3, you can reset the root password. 4, reset to factory default. So if you just really mess something up and you're just like, I just want to set this back, you can always come to the console here and do this from here instead of having to do a full reinstallation basically. You can power off the system if you need to, so 5 if you're going to do any kind of maintenance on the hardware. 6, you can just reboot the system if you feel like that's necessary as well. So just important to know that you can do that from here. A lot of times I just run these headless and I just plug in a keyboard if I need to, and just knowing what these are kind of in my head, I can just hit the number on the keyboard and hit enter, and it's going to do it. You got to be patient. Now if you're trying to run through like the assign interfaces, you may not want to do that without a monitor, but if you're just doing power off or reboot, not too bad. So I'm going to enter my option of 1 because I want to assign the interfaces. So first thing it's going to ask you is about lags. I don't need to set that up, so I'm going to say no. VLAN I'm also not going to set up right now. I'll do that later, so I'm going to say no. So it says, what interface do you want for the WAN interface? So you just need to type in the interface name that you want, and it tells you, here's the 2 interface options you have. If you have more, it'll show you more. So I'm just going to say, I want VTnet 0 as my WAN. And it's going to say, okay, cool. That's fine. What about for the LAN interface? So it says right here, what do you want for your LAN interface? And you can try A for auto detect, but obviously it auto detected wrong earlier, so no point for me doing that. So for LAN, I want VTnet 1. I'm going to hit enter. And then finally it says, okay, now do you want an optional interface? Yes, no. If not, if yes, type it in. If not, you can hit A and try to find it. Or if you're done, just hit, don't type anything and just hit enter. And we're finished, and it says, are you sure you want to save this? Yes, I do. Let it run through its process. It's going to take just a little bit of time depending on how it's getting things set up. And then it's going to come down to here to say, you know, starting up the router advertisement service. Done. Just give it a minute. It doesn't take very long, maybe 10-15 seconds at the most. It should go back to the list, but if it doesn't, I think you can just hit escape maybe. We'll try a key here in a second. No, so escape gets me out of the full screen. So we can try. So we can try to hit enter here. Nothing. So if we do Control C, there we go. So I Control C'd out of that, but you can see now that I've got my WAN interface, which is what I want, and it's kind of covered up by this, but my WAN interface is VTnet 0, and it's got an IP address off of my primary network, which is what I expect. And then my LAN interface is 192.168.100/24, so I need to remember this IP address so I can log in from the web. You can't log into your web GUI from the WAN interface by default. You have to enable that after you get into it through the LAN interface. And if you want to enable that, you can, but this is kind of unsafe, so that's why they don't allow it by default. Alright, so we've done the assignment of interfaces, which is great. We've got things set up. So I'm going to show you a couple of other things here. I'm just going to close this because it's kind of running. So I'm going to open up my network interface stuff here, and I'm going to open up my settings. I'm just going to show you. So I'm connected, and if I click on this, you can see my IPv4, and right now I'm at 10.34. This is a problem because 10 is where my WAN is running. So I remember I can't log in through the WAN. I have to go through the LAN. So I need to get my machine to have a .1 address. So I'm going to leave this up, and I'm going to briefly go over and connect up the cable, disconnect from my local area network that runs my whole internet, and I'm going to connect to this system that I just created. We're just going to give that a second, and it already says connected. We'll open it back up. And now you can see I've got a 192.168.1.101 address, which is great. So we're going to go here and we're going to open this up. And you can see that I lost my internet because pCloud's griping at me about it. That's okay. Now remember, my LAN address for the OPNSense was 1.100, so that's where I'm going first. And it's going to gripe at me, and I've got this way zoomed up, so I'm going to say advance and accept the risk because I know I just set this up. And I'm going to zoom it back up for you. Now this is the part where it goes to the white background, so kind of adjust your monitor brightness because I don't have the plug-in for the dark background. We use the same login credentials, root, and then our password. Hit login. You can tell it to save if you want to. In this case, I'm not going to. And we're going to start off, and it's going to say, hey, we're starting the initial registration. So it's going to run you through this nice little wizard, which is really great. It just makes it easy for you to get started. So I'm going to zoom this up for the people that are on their small mobile devices. And we're just going to go through this. So it just lets you know this wizard is going to guide you through the initial setup. That's great. So we're going to say next. And the first thing it's going to do is say general information. What do you want to call this? What do you want the host name to be? So we could just call this my home router, whatever you want. You can name it whatever you want. You can give it your name. It doesn't matter. Just don't put characters that aren't allowed. So underscores, things like that. You can use hyphens, but that's it. So I'm going to put my home router. How about that? And then local domain is fine. You can change this to something. So if you own the domain and you want to set this up to use your domain, you can do that. Hopefully you've got some pretty good networking understanding so that you get everything set correctly. But for just home use, this is fine. Exactly what they have here. If your language is not English, which I sometimes wonder if mine is, you can go down here and look at these other language options and pick one that might be more suitable for you. If they don't have one that you want or need, then you might say, you know what, could you add this? Or you might even offer to help them translate it into your language to help get other people using OPNSense. Your primary DNS server. So you can use any DNS servers you want. If you don't set these, it'll probably just use the ones that come in from your ISP on your modem, which is fine. In my case, I don't like their stuff, so I'm going to use 1.1.1.1 and 1.0.0.1. These are the Cloudflare DNS servers. You can also use OpenDNS or anybody else's that you want to use, like I said. This one that says allow DNS servers to be overridden by DHCP, PPP, or WAN. I like to uncheck this because this says, hey, if my ISP says to use certain DNS servers, go ahead and override what I just wrote in here. I don't like that, so I'm going to uncheck that. Unbound DNS is fine. I don't even mess with this setting. It's up to you. I'm just going to click next. Now it says here's your time server setup. So here's the time server we're going to use. That's fine. I don't really have a reason to change that. I'm going to type in my time zone. So it's usually kind of country/continent, just depending. And then maybe 2 continents in the case of America, because it's America. And there's North and South America continents. So, but I need America and I need basically Chicago. So I'm just going to scroll, or you can type. It's completely up to you how you do that. But I'm going to find my time zone. And then I'm going to hit next. Then we've got configure the WAN interface. So it is DHCP for me. But if your ISP says, here's your static WAN information, then you need to click static, and it'll enable some things down below. If you have PPPoE, you need to set that. If it's PPTP, you need to set that. I can't believe it would be this these days because this is not very secure. But in my case, it's DHCP, so I'm going to keep that. I don't need to set anything on the MAC address. If your ISP says you do, you should put that in here. On the MTU, I never mess with this. You're welcome to change it if you need to and if you know what you're doing. But some people set it to like 1540, 1580. Just different things give you a little bit more bandwidth, I think, is what it is. I hate to say bandwidth. I don't think that's the right word. But if you don't know what this is, don't change it. You really shouldn't mess with it. Just leave it alone. So as we go down, this is where I'm talking about static. If you change it to static up above, this would enable. You can see here it's got the little you can't do anything. That's fine. You don't need to if you're DHCP. But if you have static, you need to fill in the information here for static IP. If you have PPPoE, the same thing. You need to fill in whatever your ISP provides you for that information, and the same way for PPTP. Once you've got those things filled out, I do leave this checked as far as blocking private networks and blocking bogon networks. So once you've done that, hit next. Then you're going to be at the LAN interface. Now, the LAN address of 1.1 is fine. It doesn't really matter to me. You could change this to whatever you want. If you don't like 1.1, you can change this to 10.10.21.1. That's fine. Leave this on 24 unless you have a reason not to set it that way, which basically means you'll get 0 through 254 for IP addresses on this network, which is great. That's fine. We're going to hit next. Right here on the root password, I don't need to change it. So if you want to change your password, we did it a while ago in the terminal. There's no reason to change it again. But if you didn't do it there and you want to do it here, and you should change it, by the way, do it here and then hit next. Finally, you're going to reload the configuration. This is basically going to tell the system like, hey, they just made a bunch of changes. Save those things, apply them, and reload. And that means that my 1.100 is not going to work anymore because I changed my IP address. So I'm going to hit reload. And it only takes, it doesn't take very long to reload. It takes a few seconds at the most. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to have to go and get my IP address first. Actually, I'm going to get my network card to update, but it should update. It might update on its own. Let's see. It says I'm connected again. No, I've still got the 100 address. I'm going to turn this off. Just turn it off real quick. Turn it back on. I may not be able to access this because I changed that. Oh yeah, it gave me one. Look at that. 10.10.21.10. So now I've got my new IP address, so that's great. We can minimize that. And now I've got to go to 10.10.21.1 because that's what I told it to be at. So I'm going to hit advance again. It's going to warn me about the certificates. I'm going to type in with the credentials that I created, and we're logged in. So I'm going to hit don't save, and I'm going to hit never. That's fine. And I'm going to zoom up, and now you come right to your lobby dashboard. Now I'm going to make this really big again. This is what it looks like when it's at 100%, kind of out of the gate, the default setup. I don't really like the default setup. I like to change it. So let's just change the default setup first, and then we'll go through some other stuff. So I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to minimize that. I don't like to see all the services, but it does show you what services are running. So a green with a triangle means it's running. A red with a square means it's not running, so stop and play, basically. If it's not running and you want it to be running, you can start it. I don't use version 6, so nothing for me to start right now. So I'm just going to close that because I don't need it. I can get to it from other places. Gateways, again, information that if you want, you can have. I'm just going to close it. I don't use that one. And then interfaces, I do like to have. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want to add 2 gadgets. So I like to see my CPU usage. I like to see my interface statistics, and I like to see my graphs. So that's it. I've got those, and I'm going to hit save because it tells you right here, save in order to see them update. There, now we're getting some information. Okay, so I like this one above that one. See if I can get it. Yeah, so there's my interface statistics and my interfaces. And then this one, I like over here on this side. And then I want it above this one, which is hard to do. Let me expand it and collapse it again. Maybe that'll work. Oh, it moved back. I didn't get it where I wanted it. There we go. So now I can move it above that. So I like to see my traffic graphs. The information stuff is good. I like it down here. And my CPU usage can be kind of down at the bottom. And then again, if I zoom this back out to 100%, you can see what it's actually going to look like when you have it up on your screens. So pretty nice and pretty clear and easy to see. And here I can see my information about my interfaces, and here I can see my statistics on my interfaces. So this is my dashboard, kind of my ideal little dashboard. I don't have to have everything open, but if I want to see CPU information, memory information, that kind of stuff, it's down here, and this updates over time as well. So it, you know, it helps. Pretty useful. So there's my dashboard, and I'm going to save that real quick, just to kind of keep my layout. Don't forget to save, very important. We'll zoom this back up. So in order to get this set up in a way that allows you to really use the system in the way that I use mine today. So kind of what I call the basic setup that you're going to probably want. So we're going to head and go do a few things in some of these tabs. So first we're going to go to System. We're going to go to Settings. And if you click, you see that they open up just like this. We're going to go to Administration. So if you want to be able to access sites inside of your home, like you're running a Homelab like I do, and you want to access something from outside of your home network, or if you want to use your fully qualified domain names to access things that you run, you need to make some changes to the way that it's set up by default. If you don't need to make any changes, if you're not trying to do that, if you just want to have internet access and you want to be able to get your devices online, where we sit right now with the system set up the way it is, you're good. You're ready. You can go use it. You don't have to do anything else. But if you want to be able to access things in your home lab, then you have to do a few more steps, and we're going to go run through those real quick. So I don't really change much here. It does run HTTPS to get to the web interface. That's what we want. And then right here, though, this 443, it's important to make note of. This is how I'm accessing this interface right now. If you're going to be trying to push things through from the outside and still access this interface, what happens is I type in 10.10.21.1 and it says, okay, let me call that on port 80. It hits the firewall, and the firewall goes, oh no. The web server on the firewall says, no, not 80. You got to go over to 443, and it pushes me over to the HTTPS port of 443. The problem with this is, if I try to come in from the outside to hit one of my sites, it's going to see that request on 80, and after I've set up my firewall rules, it's going to go, oh no. You got to go over to 443, and it's going to take me to my interface for OPNSense, and that's not what I want. I want to get to my Nginx proxy manager that can then route me to the machines or the servers that I'm running for different tasks. In this case, it kind of stops dead here, and you're like, well, great, and now people can actually access your OPNSense from the outside, so that's bad. So we want to change this to 440. You can change this to any number you want except 443, actually, as long as it's not something you're expecting to have to port forward, but 440 works fine. So set it to 440. Then you're going to move down, and this alternate host names place. So I use the host name routemehome.org. I want to type that in right here. If you have multiple host names you use that you send back to your Homelab, you'll want to type those in here, because this tells it, hey, they're trying to access something that I'm expecting. And you just put a space and then type another one, and then put a space and type another one. If this isn't working for you for some reason, and I've had it where it doesn't, and I've had it where it does, you can also check this box. It says disable DNS rebinding checks, but it kind of becomes a security risk, so be careful with that one. It's better to type in the host names you're expecting to be accessed here. So routemehome.org. And then if I tried to go to, my special site.routemehome.org, when it hits here, it's going to go, oh yeah, I mean, I'm expecting that somebody's going to try to access that through here. And it says, okay, let me check the firewall rules, and then so on and so forth. So this is another important one to set up. I think that's really it on this screen. Let me just double check as we scroll down. For me, that's it on this screen. So I'm just going to hit save. And then once you've saved it, it's going to take you back to the top, and it's going to show you that it's done and you're ready to move to the next thing. So next we need to go to interfaces and just check our interfaces. So we're going to look at our LAN interface. The interface is enabled. That's important. Now right here, if you say, man, I hate this 10.10.21.1 thing I set up. I don't know why I did that. I want it to go back to 192.168, or I want to use 172.20.40.1. Whatever. You can change it right here. Now you have to change this in a couple of places. You're going to change it here, and then you're going to change it under your DHCP leases down there under your services. So don't forget to do that. But you'd change it here for your IP address for this LAN interface. You could also just change this to be like .10, except I'm using .10 right now, 15. So if this is where I wanted to access my OPNSense firewall, I could set it to 15. I don't want to do that, but you could. Nothing to do for the IPv6 interface, but if you make any changes here, just make sure to click save. We haven't made any changes. We'll hit cancel. But there we go. So we're going to continue down to the firewall. And, well, in fact, let's go do services first. I know this is kind of weird. We're going to jump down to DHCP, and we're going to go to LAN. We want DHCP4 and LAN. So make sure that it's enabled if you're wanting the OPNSense firewall to also be your DHCP server. In my case, I do, because then I use my dd-wrt wireless routers as just access points. They aren't doing any routing. They're just access points for me to connect. And then this actually hands out the addresses for me. So as you move down, you can see here's the network that I set up, 10.10.21.0. Here's the subnet mask. So if you don't know about subnet masking, basically 8 bits, 8 bits, 8 bits, 8 bits. This is 32, or this is 32 total bits across here. These are called octets, and depending on how you set these numbers depends on how many addresses you can get out of this thing. It could be where you only have 21, 0 through 254, or it could be that you have 20, 21, 22, and you have 0 through 254. It's really, very much up to this, and then if you use CIDR notation, it looks different. So things that you should go learn, things that are outside of the scope of what we're doing today, but just know this is just telling you here's how your network's set up right now. This tells you the available range for what you've set up. So like I said, 1 through 254. This is telling you here's the range that I'm going to hand out addresses from right now. So it's saying from 10 to 245, which means you've got from 246 to 254 that won't be handed out, and you've got from 2 to 9 that won't be handed out. You can use those for other things. I think this is a nice little preset. You might need more things. You might say, you know what, I need the first 100 to do other things with, so you can change this to 100. You might say, you know what, I need the last 100, so you could change this to 154. It doesn't really make that much difference how you set this up. Just knowing that you need some open ones that it's not going to assign out is important, so you can set this range. If you need to jump around and leave a few holes in a few places, you can add other ranges here as well. So it's kind of up to you how you do this. But just know that that's where you set this, and you want to check it and make sure it's set in a way that fits what your network needs are. If you want to have different DNS servers for the LAN for some reason, you can do that. I already set them, so I just wanted to use what's already in the system. I'm not going to change that. If you have a different gateway for some reason, you can set that, domain names, and so on. So you got a lot of settings here that you can change. There's really nothing here that I need to change. But when you're done, don't forget to click save, and then check to make sure that you don't get a little apply button up here in the top right each time. If you don't, nothing to worry about. If you do, make sure to click it to apply your changes. Alright, so we've got our DHCP4 bit range set up, and now we're going to go back to our firewall. So if I want to get to my system from outside my network, which I do a lot of times, I want to make sure that I've got my firewall set up correctly. So I go to firewall, and the first thing to know is that they have this thing called aliases. This can just really save you a lot of time if you're having to do ports, multiple ports, port ranges, things like that. This is really a cool feature that I didn't see on pfSense, but again, I don't know that it's not there. I just didn't notice it. It wasn't as prominent if they do have it. But for me, this makes things a lot easier a lot of times. So I'm going to add an alias and I'll kind of show you how it works. So we want to forward port 80 and 443 through our firewall and to our machine on our network that acts as our Nginx proxy manager server. So I'm going to click on this plus and I'm going to create a new rule. I'm going to call this web-serve. I'm going to change this from hosts and I'm going to change it to ports. In the content area, I'm going to change this. I'm going to add 80 and hit tab, and you see how it turns into a little chip. I'm going to hit 443. I'm going to hit tab, and it turns into a little chip. And then I can give this a description, which is web server. Or actually, I can just do this: HTTP and then S in parentheses, and I can save that. Well, it doesn't like the hyphen. Hang on. We'll take out the hyphen and we'll put an underscore. Let's see if that works. Yeah, there we go. So now we've got a new rule and our new alias that we can set up with our rules. All right, now we're going to go from firewall aliases. We're going to go down to firewall NAT, which is network address translation. And we're going to go to port forwarding. And you can see here it's already got kind of a general rule about your LAN setup. We're just going to add a new rule. And we don't want to disable this rule. We're going to keep the rule like it is. I'm going to zoom this up so you can see it a little bit better if you're on your phone. And we're going to say interface is WAN. Yes, we expect this to come in on the wide area network from the internet. IPv4. TCP is what we want. Sometimes you might want something different, so you could pick UDP or you could pick both. TCP is how HTTP and HTTPS traffic generally work, so we're just going to leave that. The source we're not going to have to mess with, but I'm going to show it to you. So if you click advanced, you'll see that the source says any. So that means it's coming from anybody and then from any port range. So I'm expecting traffic from anybody to make this request, and it could be from any port range. If you say, you know what, I only want this to come from a certain server, so I'm going to log into my VPN server and then it's going to be that IP address, you can go down here and tell it, you know what, this is going to come from a very specific thing, and I want it to be a single host or network, and you can put in what that host or network name is, and you can set this CIDR rule, so you can say this is a very specific address, it's only this address, no other address should be able to make this kind of request, and you're kind of securing your network this way. In our case, we want it to be any. That's fine. The ports are going to be any. So you can really restrict this down. Now, this is the part that really messed me up when I first set up this stuff. This destination, because you're like, source, any. Great. Destination, well, that's my server, right? No. This is what source is calling what destination on the internet. So the destination is actually your WAN, which is just crazy to me. But after I figured it out, I was like, oh, well, okay, it kind of makes sense now. So I'm going to say WAN net. I think that's the one we want. And then we're going to say from what port to what port. Now, remember, we created an alias for the ports that we want. So if we scroll up, we'll see our web serve ports, and you see it changes it here. So it's from and to, so it knows that. And then it says the redirect target IP. So now here is where you want to put the server on your network that you want to get to. So if it's like 10.10.21.128. If that's the server address where Nginx Proxy Manager is running, that's what you want. And you'll see here that when I picked web serve, it also filled it in here for me. So it says, I know I'm going to get it on 80 and 443. It's going to go over to the inside on 80 and 443, and then I'm going to forward that to this machine on 80 and 443. So that's going to help save you a little bit of time. You don't have to make two different firewall rules. So everything else here I don't really mess with. Description you could put, again, HTTP and S, port forwarding, something like that. And then down here, the one other thing you want to do is on this NAT reflection. Remember we set, we want to be able to get from the inside back around to the outside. So we're going to set this thing right here called enabled. This is part one. We're going to hit save. So now we've got this rule that says, hey, if a request comes in on 80 or 443, send that over to my web server thing, and it needs to go to those same ports. And then I've got the NAT reflection set. So I'm going to say apply that. Don't forget to apply changes. All right, now that we've got that set, we're going to go back over here under Firewall, and we're going to go down here to Settings and Advanced. Now, in order to go from the inside of your network out to the internet and back into your network using a URL that you own, a lot of routers just have this built in and they just do it automatically, which is nice, and it's called hairpinning or NAT reflection or NAT redirection. It just depends on what you get and what hardware you get. But here they've got NAT redirection. So I just check all three of these. Now, if you want to know what they specifically mean, you can click the little I and it expands it, and then you can click it again and it hides it. But I check all three of these to make sure that I'm going to be able to get out and back in. And then that's really the only change that we need to make on this screen. And then we go click Save. And that's it. No apply, nothing up here to apply, so it's done. So we are now set. We can now actually host something inside of our network. We've got our port forward set up. We've set up our firewall rule. We've set up our NAT redirection, which is great. And we can actually get out and browse the internet if we have the connection set up right now. This is just a virtual machine inside of my network. So it may not let me get to the internet if I try to do that. But this is really done. We've done everything we needed to do, and you've got a pretty good starting setup. Now, I've added some things on top of this, so the next video I'm going to do is going to be on dd-wrt and how I'm using that for my access points. It's also some great open source software that you can use on your own routers, depending on the router model now. Don't just go grab it and start trying to put it on there. But we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how to figure out if you have the hardware that will support it. So I hope you like this. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.